Telecom for entertaining Democrat censorship demands. Congresswoman Elise is leading that charge. She sat down with One America's Sinclair on Capitol Hill.
Congresswoman Stefanik, thank you so much for sitting down here with us.
Of course, honored to be here.
Congresswoman, we have a lot to talk about, but I'm just going to dive right in. Never before in this country's modern history have such few people had so much power over what Americans are reading and hearing on a daily basis. You've been very outspoken and very vocal in your condemnation of big business, caving into the Democrats' commands for censorship. In a recent comment, you stated that big telecom is now acting like big tech, deplatforming and censoring conservatives. So social media censorship was just the start. Is big telecom now following in the footsteps of big tech, Congressman?
You know, I'm deeply concerned about that. We saw during the 2020 election cycles that it was not only big tech that censored, for example, the New York Post story regarding Hunter Biden's laptop, which was absolutely not disinformation. It was fact, and it took, a year later for the mainstream media to acknowledge that. But we saw telecom companies limit Republicans' ability, for example, to send out text messages, which are sometimes the easiest way and most instantaneous way to reach voters where they are. So what we are focused on as House Republicans is holding big tech and holding big telecom accountable and making sure that they are not allowed to censor and have this politically biased approach to limit speech. I believe it's un-American and I believe it's unconstitutional. These big companies, big tech and big telecom, have far, far too much power over determining whether they can make the decision of what Americans can read, see, or hear.
So troubling. So the union of big tech, big telecom, big pharma, this should be concerning for all Americans. And now, when you add in the mainstream media, it's not just censorship and about freedom of information anymore. It's now about misinformation, and we've seen that. So when we hear the mainstream media networks repeating the same exact lines, the same exact stories, are they all coming from the DNC? Is this sort of a following the marching order?
Well, I think the American people have been very smart, and I think that's why you're seeing historically low approval ratings for the mainstream media, because they understand, number one, they're not focused on the issues that matter to them. Number two, in many cases, they are reiterating the talking points that the DNC and Democrat and far-left leadership are pushing out. And I think it's most obvious when you look at how the mainstream media is covering Joe Biden versus how they covered President Trump. You saw the mainstream media viciously attacking President Trump every day and frankly manufacturing controversies, manufacturing false news stories, and yet you have virtually no scrutiny of President Joe Biden. You have a mainstream media that is sweeping his deteriorating health under the rug. It's quite obvious to the American people as he struggles to host press conferences, which he rarely does, but to even call on reporters. He struggles with that.
It seems like the left has another target set on another target for takedown, and that's conservative networks. Us, One America News, Fox News, Newsmax, we're constantly under scrutiny, targeted. And although these threats to drop these conservative networks are always labeled as business decisions, we know it has nothing to do with viewership or profit. It almost always has to do with woke leadership, with these companies just caving in and left-wing pressure campaigns. And now the latest example is Verizon, one of the largest and wokest companies to date. They are looking to drop this network, One America News, from their lineup. What pressure are you and Republican colleagues possibly putting on Verizon, or can you put on a company like Verizon?
It's not up to Verizon to determine what American citizens, what information they can access. That's up to the consumer themselves. We need to return more to consumer rights, and we need to return, frankly, to the Constitution, where there are protections for freedom of speech, where we stand against this cancel culture that we're seeing at every level. We're seeing it certainly in politics every day, but you're seeing it from the media perspective. And what's interesting is it's the mainstream media whose viewership is going down.
One really quick last question. We focus on censorship, the increasing and obvious limitations of our freedoms, but there is a plethora of equally concerning issues right now under this administration. What are your predictions, Congresswoman, for the midterm elections?
I am very optimistic. I think we're going through a political realignment. I will tell you, in my district and across America, people are concerned about the inflation crisis, the energy crisis, the border crisis, the crime crisis, and really the constitutional crisis. They're also concerned that Democrats in unified Washington, it's one-party rule, they're deeply out of touch and dismissive of the priorities and challenges of the American people. I think we are going to win back the House. We're certainly going to work hard to do that, and I think it could be the biggest majority in a century.
Well, Congresswoman, thank you so much for fighting on behalf of the American people and our freedoms and our constitutional rights. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
For all our viewers